Hello, everyone. My name is Boone Zavik, and we will be beginning the webinar in just a few moments. I see several people still logging into the webinar, so we're just going to give them just a few moments. And I'm actually going to start a poll to ask you guys a question in just a couple seconds. So first off, I guess I can also properly introduce myself. My name is Boone Zavik, and I am there it is. Hello. My name is Boone Zavik, and I am the Vice President and Marketing Manager of Immuno Laboratories. First off, thank you so much for being a part of this webinar. I also greatly appreciate that you've given us a ton of questions. We actually received over 200 questions. So unfortunately on this webinar, we're not going to be able to answer every single question, but we did go through to try to crunch down what were the repeated themes that individuals did have a question on, so we can make sure we get that answered. So as I mentioned in the registration, we do have a presentation ready, and then at the end of that presentation, we're going to make sure to go through questions that were already submitted in the registration, and then any questions that the people that are attending live have, we'll be able to start answering those as well. So at any time, if you have a question about specifically what I'm presenting on, go ahead and submit it into the question box, and then I'll either be able to answer it then quickly, or I'll just wait till the end, open up the questions, and start going through all of them. So let me close the webcam, because I know that sometimes can slow down the presentation for individuals. All right, so the first poll that I'd like to give, I'd like to get to know everyone a little bit better, is what types of foods do you enjoy the most? So I'm just kind of curious. If you had a favorite type of food, what is it? Do you have a big sweet tooth? Are savory foods your everything? Are you more just about fresh foods in general, or if we're just going to be honest with one another, is it really just junk foods that are the best, or all in all, do you just like healthy foods? I just want to just kind of get to know everyone a little bit better as we're waiting for more people to join into the webinar. So I see that we've gotten a decent amount of people voting. I'm actually, it's interesting to see how much some of the choices are growing, and then other choices are coming in. So I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now. Looks like everyone's kind of stabilized on their answer. Got a few more people submitting answers. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll because we have one more after this. Close it, and then let me share the results with everyone. I think it now comes up. There we go. So, surprise, surprise, the big winner is Sweet Tooth. But hey, I'm happy to see that the next one is that you just love fresh foods. I will say that, obviously I love, sweets. That's why it was kind of the first choice in this poll. But with that being said, I have found that if you just get some fresh, blueberries or strawberries, or just some fresh berries in general, or fresh fruit, really, it really does help you with that sweet tooth, and it is a healthier option. The next just quick poll I have is, people are still coming into the registration, is, there we go, close that one out. And the reason I'm asking this second poll is because based on the questions, I just want to better understand, have individuals already had any type of a IgG food allergy or food sensitivity test? Yes, you have tested yourself for IgG food reactions, or no, you have not tested for an IgG food sensitivity reaction, or you've only been tested for IgE immediate reactions. Because based on a lot of the questions that we saw, I had a feeling that the audience here is probably largely individuals that have actually already been tested and just want to better understand what this test is about and how it can help them. So I see a couple more people voting. Got vast majority of the people submit the vote. Okay, excellent. We'll go ahead and close this poll. And just to share so everyone kind of knows who they're here with on the presentation, it looks like majority of the people, as I suspected, have already tested themselves for an IgG food reaction. So we're going to get more into the specifics. So let me go and hide that poll. I'm just going to move this little window that I have. Okay, so now let's get into the presentation. For those of you that joined a little bit later, my name is Boone Zavik. I'm the Marketing Manager and Vice President of Immuno Labs, and today we're going to be presenting on the science behind food allergy testing. We just did that quick poll. Thank you everyone who participated. Now, the focus of the presentation is going to be through this agenda. So what is a hypersensitivity? How does a food sensitivity differ from a food intolerance and food allergy? We saw a lot of questions that were around this. How is a food sensitivity test performed? What is being analyzed? And what is the research on food sensitivities and case studies of individuals who had a food sensitivity test performed? What was the outcome for them? And I will tell you, I had to actually reduce this section a little bit because I want to make sure that we have more than enough time to go through everyone's questions. So I do have one case study. In future webinars, we will be diving a lot more into other case studies because I feel that there's going to be a lot of questions around that. I see one question came in. Okay, excellent. People just put in questions, let me know they're here on the webinar. Thank you so much for your participation. Okay. Then also, we're going to be answering several pre-submitted questions, and then I'm just going to open the webinar up for additional questions. So let's go ahead and get into the content. So what is a hypersensitivity? How does a food sensitivity differ from a food intolerance and food allergy? So what is a hypersensitivity? A hypersensitivity refers to undesirable reactions produced by the normal immune system, including allergies and autoimmunity. Now, the reason I'm asking what a hypersensitivity is because all of the reactions that we're going to be talking about today fall under that category of a hypersensitivity or an allergy, because hypersensitivity and allergy are usually exchangeable words. On this presentation, we're going to be focusing specifically on two of the main groups of hypersensitivities, which is delayed food sensitivity reactions, which is measured through an IgG reaction, and immediate food allergy reactions, which is largely measured through an IgE reaction. So what is a food sensitivity? There's a lot of critique around food sensitivities, and it's largely due to the language that's being used to define a food sensitivity. If you're trying to say that food sensitivity is a immediate allergy, or it is a traditional allergy, or it can be measured through an IgE response, well, that's not correct. That is not what a food sensitivity is. A food sensitivity is going to actually be the opposite of all three of those things, because it's not a traditional allergy, it's not going to be measured through IgE, and it's not going to be immediate. So what is it? A food allergy. Let's begin there, because I feel like that's what most people have a good understanding of. A food allergy is an immunoglobulin E, IgE, mediated reaction. IgEs are allergic antibodies which cause an immediate reaction due to release of chemicals such as histamine from mast cells. And the big key here is immediate. For example, there was a popular movie with Will Smith called Hitch. He's this relationship guy. I think it's a relationship coach, and he's on a date touching some whitefish or maybe salmon, and then he touches his face and his ear, and he gets really swollen, and he has to rush to the pharmacy, and that gets some Benadryl to control that reaction. That is an immediate IgE reaction. So what is a food intolerance? Food intolerance is probably best illustrated by individuals that are lactose intolerant. They're lacking that specific enzyme that breaks down that food. So still, oftentimes, intolerance and sensitivity are interchanged, but if we're to get very specific about what they mean, they are different. But food sensitivities is what we're going to focus the most on, which is an immunoglobulin G, IgG, mediated reaction, a delayed reaction to specific foods you eat, but is not due to missing something in the body to digest it. So that's where the big difference is in an IgG reaction versus the other two, is that it's delayed and you're not missing something to kind of break down that food that you're exposed to, or that allergen you're exposed to. So I want to put up a chart real quick that is showing things related to an IgE reaction. It usually involves just a couple foods. For example, I'm sure a lot of people are familiar with how children will have an issue with strawberries or peanuts or with summertime being, around a lot of pollens, environmental allergies, hay fever, all of these things are immediate allergies. They're severe reactions from just one food challenge, one exposure, and there's going to be some immediate severe reaction. And largely, it's really only 10 to maybe 12% of the population that suffers from immediate allergies, and a large percentage of that group is children because their immune system isn't fully developed until later in life, so they're more prone to have some of these allergies and then potentially grow out of them. And it's commonly the same reactive foods, meaning that when individuals have immediate allergies, it's rare that someone has an immediate allergy to, goji berries and someone else has some immediate allergy to like dirt. It's usually going to be very kind of common foods. That's where it's often referred to as, like, I think it's the Big 10 allergy foods, or like the Big 8, which is, peanuts, shellfish, strawberries, tree nuts, things like that. Now, this is what a food sensitivity is. It involves, 3 to maybe 20 plus foods. There's a few reactions from one food challenge, so it's not going to be as severe. The symptoms are very delayed. It can be delayed up to 72 hours, which also makes it very challenging to pinpoint what food caused that reaction. It can affect any tissue or organ, and it's quite common in both children and adults, and it triggers inflammation, which results in chronic recurring symptoms. So another question that we often got in this webinar was, what kinds of symptoms, what kinds of things can be causing this issue? So as you can see on your screen, and there may be a little bit of a lag, but there's a bunch of symptoms that are coming up. Now, all of these symptoms are found on our symptom checklist, and these are symptoms that individuals are having that is related into food sensitivities, food reactions that they're having. So it's really difficult to say that, okay, if you have this one symptom, then it's for sure going to be a food sensitivity. But with that being said, the big underlying thing that you want to look for when you're looking at symptoms related to a food sensitivity is this symptom chronic? Is this something that is happening over and over again? Is this some kind of a recurring issue? And if so, then that's why you want to start looking into food sensitivities, because that's where you start getting some relief. So why test for food? 100 million people believe they have a food allergy or they have modified their diet. Thus, while food allergy is commonly suspected, healthcare providers diagnose it less frequently than most people believe. Now, on this webinar, we have both physicians and consumers, people who have received the testing. And the reason I put this point up here is because to our physician clients out there, a lot of times the symptoms that you're looking at with patients seems like it could be something else. But in our opinion, the easiest way to just kind of, I guess, set the baseline of making sure that there isn't some outside thing affecting this individual is to look at the food. And same for those individuals on here that have been tested themselves, is you really want to look at the foundations of kind of your lifestyle to figure out what things may be triggering this chronic thing. And that's why we highly recommend, getting tested and doing the IgG testing to find out what that food is that you potentially are eating that you can then simply avoid. So surveys show that 60% of patients believe a dietary allergy affects their symptoms, and 50% of patients report IBS symptoms most often arise after eating a meal. So how does a food sensitivity testing work? So this is where I'm going to get a bit more into the science side of it. So first, there's the exposure to antigens, which stimulates the innate and adaptive immune system. Then there's the disruption of the epithelial tight junctions, which causes leaky gut. And on the next slide, I'm going to show a graphic that better explains leaky gut. The food is seen as an invader or foreign body as it leaks into the connective tissue. The food antigens activate IgG-producing plasma cells and mast cells, and the inflammatory cascade is initiated, which leads to local and systemic inflammation that starts triggering those acute and chronic diseases. And this just keeps repeating and repeating as the individual is getting exposed to this food over and over again. So the leaky gut progression. So this is a graphic that we found that very well explains what's going on. And I actually couldn't find we actually had a scientific image of the tight junction kind of opening, and I'll have to see if I can find the image and follow it up with everyone. But this is a good kind of cartoon illustration showing what's going on is First, you're having that food that's then triggering this inflammation that's leading that tight junction to open so that the immune system can kind of go out to fight against that. But unfortunately, as kind of a doorway works is once the door is open, things can go in and out. So that's where a lot more foods will come in and start to cause more havoc. So why do food sensitivities matter? Why is this something that needs to be evaluated? And the reason is because for several people, they're going to sit down to their meal and they're going to see this beautiful, healthy, nourishing meal, and they're going to be really excited about getting ready to have this delicious meal that maybe their significant other cooked, or maybe they're on a date night, going out to this nice restaurant. But for so many people, it instead is a ticking time bomb that's on their plate. As we're saying earlier in that survey, majority of people with IBS, they have an issue arise right after they eat that food. So it becomes a big issue for them. More importantly, chronic diseases are responsible for 7 out of 10 deaths each year. And treating people with chronic diseases accounts for 86% of our nation's healthcare costs. I know we have a lot of international clients, so whenever I'm talking about nation, it's always going to be about the United States. Behavioral cases such as poor diet and being sedentary account for nearly 40% of all deaths. And irritable bowel syndrome, IBS, is the common functional gastrointestinal disorder with worldwide prevalence rates ranging generally in the area of 10 to 15%. That's 1.1 billion people with IBS. So there's a lot of individuals that need help and need to understand that there's a relationship between the food that they're eating and how they feel. So what is this link between food and chronic disease? Well, straight from the CDC, they're reporting that 80% of heart disease, 80% of type 2 diabetes, and 40% of all cancers are preventable by eliminating 3 risk factors: poor diet, inactivity, and smoking. I don't think anyone was surprised by the smoking, but the poor diet becomes challenging because it raises the question of what is the right food to eat. And Americans are falsely believing that their diet is healthy. 89.7% said their diet was somewhat, very, or extremely healthy. Only 25% limit the amount of fat or sugar that they eat, 67% don't eat enough fruit and vegetables, and 1 in 3 adults are obese, even though losing weight is the second most popular New Year's resolution. 4 in 10 Americans said they ate pretty much everything or mostly everything. So there's a challenge here in figuring out, do I actually have excellent health, and how is it relating into what's really going on? Because 87% of Americans report their health as excellent, very good, or good, yet about half of them had 1 out of the 10 chronic conditions. And if we kind of start breaking it down, there's about 24% that had 1 chronic condition, and almost 14% had 2 chronic conditions, and about 12% had 3 or more chronic conditions. So we need to start looking at what's going on with food sensitivities, and how can we start pinpointing what the right food would be for an individual to eat, because a lot of us are thinking that we're healthy, but we still have these recurring issues going on. So now I want to start diving more into the actual science of how we perform the testing. So at Immuno Laboratories, we perform the ELISA test, which stands for Enzyme Linked Immunosorbent Assay. And we specifically do the indirect ELISA methodology. So for a lot of our physicians on this webinar, I'm sure that this diagram makes sense to you. And for our consumers or people that may not have spent as much time studying this, I'm going to explain more about exactly what's going on in this testing in just a couple slides. So first, I want to show what this looks like. So we talk about testing and analyzing the blood, but what does it actually look like? And what it really looks like is when we have your specimen and the food antigen on the microtiter plate, which is what you see pictured here. Actually, let's see if I can get my little drawing tool out, or spotlight. So this is what you can actually see is when we perform the testing, we'll see that there are different colored wells. More specifically, our testing will first it looks all blue, and then we stop the reaction, it turns all yellow. So we'll see something more like this, where there's some deeper yellows and then some lighter yellows, and a deeper yellow is what's indicating that there's a strong reaction going on. So let's turn my pen tool back off. Okay. So how is the testing performed? So the first step is obviously we need to have the blood drawn. Once the blood is drawn through a venipuncture process, we need it to arrive to us in 10 days or less. And I have a note here about the FedEx shipping because this is really important that your specimen is getting back to the laboratory quickly, because depending on what kind of testing you're having performed, meaning if you're working with us Immuno Laboratories or if you're working with another lab that may be doing a different type of testing, if they're looking at live blood cells, that can become a huge issue because blood serum is incredibly stable, and blood serum is what we perform our testing on at Immuno Labs. So we want to make sure that your specimen gets back to us quickly so that the serum is still staying in its normal state, so we can have the testing and not have any false positives or false negatives. Also, for our testing, there's no preparation needed and fasting is not required. Advanced preparation is usually an indicator that the lab is not using proper quality controls when it comes to food sensitivity testing. That's not a statement for all testing because several tests will need you to do some preparation beforehand, especially fasting. But for our testing, there is no need to do any preparation ahead of time. So step 2. Immuno Labs uses individually sealed microtiter plates. And actually, let me turn my webcam back on real quick. See it coming back up. Let's see. Okay, excellent. So this is the microtiter plate. I'm going to try to turn it a little bit just to give some idea of it. So we want to make sure that this plate is individually sealed because we don't want anything else to be interfering with the testing. We don't want anything else to contaminate what's going on in that testing process. So we make sure that all those are individually sealed, which is also another reason of how we're able to keep such a high reproducible and accurate test. I know there's a lot of questions around accuracy, and these are several of the things that we have in our testing process to make sure that we have a high level of accuracy. One of them being using individually sealed microtiter plates, another being that we use FDA approved antigens to ensure that what we're testing you on is that the actual food that you're being exposed to and eating out in the real world. The next step, which you can see here, and let me get my little highlight tool, that you can see going on here is that we have a lab tech pipette serum onto food antigens. Our laboratory is CLIA licensed and our entire lab staff is licensed and certified to ensure that we are producing the highest quality test for you. Over a few hours, the antibodies in the serum interact with the food antigens, and that's when we start getting the reactions. I see a couple questions have come in. I'm just going to open the question pane real quick. Okay, I see something coming up. Okay, I'm going to answer that question a bit later. There's a question in regards to testing for milk reactivity. So I'll make sure that we're all clear on the slide so far. So now step 3. Once the enzyme markers attach to the food antigen reactive wells, enzyme substrates are added, and within minutes, a visible color change occurs in each well with elevated antibodies. So this lets us know that there's a reaction going on. The next step is that we're essentially putting a flashlight to each one of those wells that you see over here. We're essentially putting a flashlight onto each one of these to then measure how strong of a reaction is going on. If there's a very strong reaction, then not much light is going to pass through. If there is no reaction, then a whole bunch of light is going to be able to pass through. Also, on each one of our tests, aside from the steps that we have going into the testing, we make sure that we have a positive and negative control on every patient's test. Because I was talking about how there can be, a difference in labs, and I saw a couple questions coming in, which I'll address one of them later on, in regards to how can we compare testing between different labs. And the thing is, not all laboratories are doing all of these, different quality controls and calibrating factors to ensure the highest reproducibility of testing. So what we have done is we actually, on each individual's test, on each one of the microtiters, sorry, just getting the highlight tool again. On 5 of these wells, we're going to look for what's going to be just a blank reaction, what's going to be a higher reaction, what's going to be a low reaction, what does your serum look like with nothing interfering with it. So we're doing several things on each one of these microtiters to really hit on what is the best practice, which is every patient has positive and negative controls to ensure specificity and sensitivity of reaction. So our testing is calibrated to fit the unique person, not the other way around. And what I mean by that is at Immuno Laboratories, we are not setting the calibration for a batch of plates and then saying everybody is going to fit in to these calibrations that we've just set as a standard. Instead, we're having your individual body and your individual body's blood serum tell us what the reactions should be at based on how your body reacts. So this is actually a huge kind of secret and key that allows us to have such high reproducible tests and produce the most relevant results to you. Relevant meaning when you take action on these results, you actually feel better. You actually have an improvement in your health. So this brings me to the next slide, which is who can benefit from food sensitivity testing. The three main areas that we see that we can help people drastically with our food sensitivity testing are individuals with digestive challenges. 1 out of 5 Americans have digestive symptoms, irritable bowel syndrome, gastrointestinal symptoms, leaky gut even, patients with skin rashes and hives, such as eczema or dermatitis, acne, lupus, especially due to the autoimmune nature of this condition. People with chronic conditions. So if you are an individual that needs to lose weight or you're chronically just feeling tired, like every single day you have to reach for that, 5th or 6th cup of coffee, that's something's going on there, and it's probably some kind of food sensitivity triggering this inflammation. Headaches and migraines, problems sleeping, joint muscles, and once again, we're looking for those chronic nagging symptoms. And if you're wondering, I guess more on the physician side, who would be a good individual to introduce this to, the first step you really want to do is look at the symptom checklist and better understand the symptoms that are affecting you personally, or to a physician looking at your patients to find out what's affecting them. The symptom checklist really allows a scorecard where both the physician and the patient can clearly see what areas still need attention and the areas that are having improvement. So you can see, hey, what's working really well and what is kind of falling to the side. Because although, on this, we're focused on food allergies and food sensitivities, health is not a one-stop shop. It's not that there is one thing and that will solve everything under the sun. But with that being said, if you are recurrently eating food that's triggering inflammation and causing these symptoms, then that will be one of the easiest things to fix, because it's as simple as don't reach for the broccoli, instead reach for spinach, or don't have gluten, instead have gluten-free foods. So I know it's difficult to make that change, but as far as how you can quickly shift your health, if you find out that you're having issues with these certain foods, it becomes quite easy to go, okay, I'm now motivated to make these changes, and you'll quickly see these benefits. So let's get into the research. What has the research found about food sensitivities? In this first research that I'm going to dive into, they were looking to see individuals that have what appears to be an allergy, or under further testing, is it actually a sensitivity? Now, in this study, they're using the language of a food intolerance, but since they're looking at IgG-mediated, food reactions, in reality, they're looking at food sensitivity. So the objective of this study was to look at individuals who were presenting allergic symptoms, but they were lacking laboratory evidence of an allergy. So this is where I was talking about there's IgG, let me get my little highlighter out, where there's IgG and then IgE. So in this case, we'll say the E stands for allergy, right? So they're looking to see what's going on internally with the person. Externally, we're seeing symptoms that look like allergy, but internally, is it an allergy or is it a food sensitivity? So this is a fascinating study. It was actually done just recently, just in 2016. So what they found out is, well, first, the patient base. So the patients were screened for food-specific IgG antibodies, all symptomatic patients lacking laboratory evidence of allergy who underwent a food-specific IgG testing during the study. So once again, individuals that did not have laboratory evidence of an allergy, but were showing symptoms related to an allergy, and now they're going to have an IgG test. The conclusion was incredible. There's a detection of a variety of food-specific IgG antibodies among patients with allergic symptoms indicating a possible link to food intolerance allergy. And females were more prone to develop a food intolerance more than males. Now, once again, the words they're using here are intolerance. I think what they actually meant to have here is a food sensitivity because they're analyzing IgG. They weren't looking to see if there's a lack of enzyme. So what does the research say about GI disorders and sensitivities? So we actually had research that was conducted on our laboratory specifically, where they're looking at the immunobloodprint food sensitivity test. The conclusions that they were able to find is that Immuno Laboratories, with our test results to the individuals in the studies, we were able to improve all indicators of quality of life in response to eliminating the IgG reactive foods. And also the compliance in this research was incredibly high. Individuals in the study found it very easy to continue to comply with this because like I was saying, when you realize that, hey, all I need to do is not eat, this food, but instead have this food. And as soon as you start doing that, you feel better. It kind of self-perpetuates itself. You realize, you know what? I want to keep eating the food that's good for me because I feel good and my symptoms are gone. So what does the recent research say about migraines and sensitivities? So in research that I found, they're looking on the diet restriction in migraine based on IgG against foods, and this was a clinical double-blind randomized crossover trial. So this is kind of a gold standard. So let me break down what that means. Double-blind means that the people who are working with the study participants do not know what the right diet should be for the person. So, for a certain period of time, they're going to say, okay, individuals, you're going to have this meal, and then they're going to switch after a certain period of time and then give them a different meal or a different diet. But the people who are conducting this research don't know what the, quote, right diet is going to be for that individual. Also, the individuals, the patients, they don't know what the right one should be. So it's a good way to test, what's going on as far as, is this some placebo effect or is it not? The conclusions were incredible. It was the first randomized crossover study in migraineurs showing that diet restriction based on IgG antibodies is an effective strategy in reducing the frequency of migraine attacks. So if you're an individual out there that either has migraines or knows someone that suffers from migraines, I highly recommend having them getting tested with us so we can start pinpointing what those foods are so they can avoid that food, potentially not have to take a medication all the time or even reaching for that Tylenol or Excedrin all the time, and instead allow their body to go back into homeostasis by simply removing the foods that are triggering that inflammation and initiating that migraine. Also, we had another study that was performed on our laboratory specifically that was looking at the relationship between food sensitivities and migraines and headaches, and the subjects were able to improve their migraine symptoms and quality of life in response to eliminating IgG reactive foods from the diet. The reason that the studies on Immuno Laboratories were also looking at quality of life is because we wanted to make sure that when the person had a symptom improvement, that it wasn't just isolated to that symptom, meaning we didn't want to have someone no longer have migraines, but then start having IBS, right? So we want to make sure that the overall quality of their life was also being improved as their symptoms were being reduced. And we also performed this with obesity and sensitivities. So we had a study where we were eliminating immunological reactive foods from the diet and looking at its effect on body composition and quality of life in overweight individuals. And this was once again performed on our specific testing, the immunobloodprint. And the subjects were able to improve their body composition and quality of life in response to eliminating IgG reactive foods from the diet. The reason that I once again want to touch on the quality of life here is that I'm sure there's been a lot of us on this webinar that have tried the diet and maybe we lost some weight, but maybe we felt like really fatigued or we just didn't feel good or we were like incredibly hungry. So once again, it's a huge bonus to see in this research that was conducted on us that we were not only able to improve the specific symptom the individual is looking for, but most importantly, really, we were able to find out that we were can improve their quality of life overall. So I'm sure a lot of you on this webinar received my email talking about, can food sensitivities help you run faster? This was research that was conducted on the impact of food elimination diet on collegiate athletes' 300-meter run time and concentration. I was super excited about becoming, a superhero with like super speed and all that stuff, but unfortunately, it cannot make you run faster, but it can improve concentration. So this once again touches on, who is a food sensitivity test going to be right for? And really it's going to be right for individuals that are looking to have an improvement in their health, an improvement in their chronic conditions, and overall improvement in their performance. So how do you know if a food allergy testing will be right for you? We highly recommend that you have a symptom checklist that's filled out either with your the physician that you're working with, or just for yourself. Fill this out, start understanding what's going on in your health. And actually, I do have a handout for this, although I did see a majority of you have already had a testing performed. I want to make sure to release the studies that we had performed. Oh, I guess the handouts are already there. I don't even have to release them. Excellent. Okay. Oops, let me just move away from this to my normal thing. Okay, so if you actually look in the handout section, you'll be able to download all the handouts. We have the headache and migraine study, we have the IBS whole study, we have the Journal of Obesity study, we also have our guarantee and our symptom checklist, which I'll be getting into more of those things in a few moments. Let me just shift back to the spotlight. Okay, so do food sensitivities really work? Now, the reason I want to get into this is because when someone has migraines, or someone has irritable bowel syndrome, or someone has joint pain, or someone's chronically tired, it's hard to have a picture of that, right? You have a person that's before and after, and they look the same. There's not much of a change because it's all internal. It's all in how their body's performing and how they're feeling. So I put this picture up because this is an individual. This was a baby that was tested with us, and you can see here that this is before the testing, and just like that study earlier said, this looks like an immediate reaction that's going on. But in reality, with this individual, it was a food sensitivity that was happening. So once that food sensitivity was identified and that child avoided eating that food for 14 days, or rather the parent knew not to feed this child that food, I mean, this is what they look like. No more of the rashes, even the eyes are all completely, back to normal. It essentially looks like a completely different child because of these improvements that went on with this person. Once again, I'm showing this picture because it's hard to see what an improvement in fatigue looks like, or an improvement in irritable bowel syndrome looks like. That's all internal. But I think that this image can help kind of show everyone what the benefits can be. So now I want to get into the case study. So we have a case study with an individual called Jane. For HIPAA and personal health information reasons, we're not allowed to use the person's specific name or identifying features, which is why I have it in quotes. Their name is not actually Jane, but that's what we're going to be using. So case study, Jane. She suffered for 10 years. She was a female, 24 years at the time of testing. Her symptoms were constant headaches, various stomach problems, difficulty sleeping, and she had a groggy feeling, day to day. So kind of like a bit of a brain fog going on. And the length of time she experienced these symptoms, over a period of 10 years, which was about half her life as we look back at how she was only 24, right? Actions that she had taken to resolve her challenges. She visited several different physicians. She went to specialists for help. She tried various medications with various strengths. So she was kind of doing everything under the sun to try to figure out what was going on. I mean, once again, she took 10 years trying to figure this all out. Her diet routine at the time, according to her, she never ate poorly. She ate the same foods every day during the week. And on the weekend, meals varied slightly, which I'm sure is, the case for most of us, right? We have our weekday routine. If we wake up, we make our meal, we go out to lunch, or bring our lunch to work. We have dinner with our family, and then we go to bed and we start all over. On the weekend, maybe we get a bit crazy, maybe we have a zag day and whatnot. Placebo effect. Did she think that the food sensitivities would work? In reality, she was actually reluctant to getting tested, and she only ended up getting tested because of her physician's suggestion. And she was very skeptical that diet change could make any difference, especially after 10 years and multiple physicians and specialists and different prescriptions and drugs that she had tried to resolve her issues. Which, I mean, listen, I don't blame her. I would be incredibly skeptical myself if I had that experience. So what did her results actually look like? So these are the results that she had. She was reactive to 21 foods out of the 154 that we tested. She had 1+4 food, she had 1+3 food, she had 3+2 foods, and she had 16+1 foods. And I'm referring to this plus number, I'm looking at this number here, right? So brewer's yeast was a +4. The +3 food is alfalfa, and the +2 foods you can see here, the cow's milk, etc. So that's where I'm referencing those plus numbers. So change in symptomatology. Wait, did I skip a slide? No, sorry. Change in symptomatology after a diet adjustment. After 2 weeks of following our diet recommendations, her headaches were gone. After 4 weeks, her digestive disorders were gone. And in an additional 4 weeks, her sleeping, or she was sleeping for longer periods of times. And this is from her words. After the next few weeks went by, I generally felt better, more energy, better quality of sleep, no debilitating headaches during the day. Every major problem I was having seemed to be alleviated by making small changes in my diet as instructed by the food sensitivity results. After I had completed 90 days, I felt like a new person. So what about a food challenge? She did reintroduce the reactive foods 6 months later, and she immediately began to feel worse and her symptoms started to come back. In her own words, I was very shocked to see that the small changes I made to what I ate drastically changed how I felt on a day-to-day basis. Without the results, I would have never figured out and relieved all those symptoms that so many doctors had missed. As I mentioned earlier, we have many more case studies. We will be doing future webinars diving into a lot of these case studies, especially based on some of the questions that we had from people wondering, more specifically about what individuals' experiences were and how they started feeling better. Just to show you all, what do the test results actually look like? I just want to kind of dissect this for a moment. On your test results, you'll see, the immunobloodprint, what the specific test was. You have your lab ID code. This is really for the physician and us, the laboratory, to help quickly find your results if you need them in the future. Your date of birth, your name, testing date, specimen collection date. I believe we also have a few other identifying items on the test results. But then as we get into the test result, what you will see is the reactive test results. Everything that's here in red, or if you were given a black and white copy, it's going to be everything under the reactive test results are the foods that you need to avoid. These are the foods you do not want to eat. Below that, though, we do show your non-reactive test results. So since we test for a high number of foods, we want to be able to tell you that, yes, out of all the foods we tested you on, which are listed all here, that you did not have a reaction to, which means you can eat these foods. So we did have several questions where people are like, oh my God, it's reactive to 30 or 40 foods. I can't eat anything. What can I do? And that's where you can go to your non-reactive test results, look at those foods, and start exploring different meals. Start looking at different things that you can eat, and we do have people that can support you, whether it's working directly with your physician or reaching out to us so that we can connect you with one of our health coaches to help you make up those diets or understand how to swap out various things, such as I want to still be able to have protein powder, but I came up reactive to cow's milk. What other protein powders are there? Our person can be able to help you with that, or I'm sure your physician can help you as well. The second thing that come with your results is a 4-day rotation food plan. And on day 1, we'll say, okay, if you want a protein, here's the various proteins you can have. If you want a vegetable, here's the various vegetables, etc., with the different food groups. And then on that day 1, you can have as much of that food as you want, as long as it still fills into the bounds of your diet goals. And then on day 2, you can eat these foods. Really the goal of this comprehensive, food elimination plan is we're taking out all the foods that you're reactive to, and we're giving you a template for foods that you can have on the 4-day rotation. So that makes it easier when you go to the grocery store or when you're looking for recipes. You can just look and go, okay, this recipe, is a chicken recipe. It calls for these various vegetables. Great, this recipe is going to work for me. So we're doing everything that we can to make this as easy for you as possible. So now we're going to get into the fun part, the questions and the answers. Since this is a live webinar, please go ahead and start submitting your questions. If you still have some, I am going to start diving into questions that we already received from the registration, and I'll just start answering them directly here live. And let me get my webcam up so you can see me as well. Hold on one second. People can see you, Gotcha. Okay. So I guess you can see me. I was trying to see if I could pull up the webcam image, but we're good to go. So the first question that we received was, if the allergy test results show a lower number, what is the effect on the body if you still continue to ingest that food? And this is from Michelle Graham from Michigan. So actually, let me open up the attendee list, see if she's in here. Oh, we got a whole bunch of people, and it's going to be really hard for me to find them. Okay, so Michelle, if you're on here, congratulations. We're going to answer your question first. So what I'm assuming here is you're asking, if it's a low number, if it's a +1, is it still having an effect on your body? We get this question all the time. And although we do have these different ranges of reactivity, +1, 2, 3, and 4, in all reality, when it comes to what's triggering your symptom, they're all essentially the same, meaning a +1 food could be triggering a reaction just as strongly as a +4 food when it comes to the symptoms that you're feeling. And I know that seems counterintuitive because a +4 reaction means your immune system is having a much stronger response, but it could be that the +1 food is the one that's more so triggering that symptom. So yes, you do want to avoid all of the foods that are coming up reactive when you have your test results. Next question. There are many different food sensitivity tests. Are they all equivalent? Can the results across tests be compared? Yes, there are a few different types of food sensitivity tests. Some of them will be looking at IgG, such as ourselves, where we look at all 4 subclasses of IgG. There's other tests out there where they only look at IgG4. Now, the issue with that is that IgG4 is only 4% of the entire immunoglobulin G. So it's a very incomplete picture of what's going on. So we do not recommend doing that testing. There are other tests out there where they're looking at white blood cells, cytotoxic reactions, things of that nature. There's also even hair tests to look for food sensitivities. That one, I mean, to be completely honest, I do not understand how a hair analysis is going to be able to pinpoint the food sensitivity. I don't get the science behind that, so I wouldn't recommend that at all. When it comes to the white blood cells and cytotoxic testing, that's actually how we started our business. We used to be called Physician Cyto Labs, and we did cytotoxic testing. What we found, though, was that because we're testing on live cells, it's very challenging to keep them alive and to also make sure that there aren't anything else that's interacting with them. Because it is a live element, it's very difficult to ensure reproducible results. Because of that, we chose to move away from doing cytotoxic testing. I know that there's still, maybe a lab or two that's out there that does perform this testing. And if you ever are to perform a split sample where you take your blood, put into, actually I got the 2 different vials here. If you're to take your blood, put it into 2 different vials and have that, testing performed, you'll find that the results are drastically different. And that was the problem that we noticed, and that's why we went away from cytotoxic testing. So to answer the last part of your question, can the results across tests be compared? Usually they cannot, because the methodology is going to be different. The calibrating factors are going to be different. Calibrating factors meaning, when I was mentioning that our microtiter is individually sealed, and then the calibration meaning that on these 5 wells, we're actually personalizing the test and the results to you, instead of saying that, hey, this is just the standard for all reactions and this is how the results will be. So now we have a question from Julie. Julie from Australia, nice. I'm not sure if you're going to be able to be live on the webinar, but hopefully you'll see the recording. How often do I need to be tested? And if I am already on a restricted diet, does it matter? We recommend retesting when you first get tested, we recommend that you retest 6 months later, because that's going to allow you 90 days of avoiding the food and then 90 days of starting to reintroduce the food. And then you can get retested and see, okay, do I still have any of my original food sensitivities, or are they gone? Do I have new ones? So after your first test, we'd highly recommend retesting in 6 months. After that 6 month period, we recommend retesting at longest every year, but more than likely every 9 months would be best. Why do IgG test results seem to be sensitive to foods the individual eats most frequently? This is from Shelly from California. Funny enough, my sister's name is Shelly. She spells it a bit differently though. So why do IgG test results seem to be sensitive to foods the individual eats most frequently? The reason for this is that usually an individual that's having some recurring chronic issue, it's going to be fueled by the food that they're eating. So if they were to have a test result come back and it's some food that they've never seen or never been exposed to, then that would be concerning because it's not in their diet. So you will normally see that individuals will have foods that they're eating all the time be the ones that are reactive to them. With that being said, it's usually anecdotal that it's only the foods they're eating all the time. For example, for myself, for pretty much majority of my life until just recently, I had eggs every single day and probably at least 4 eggs every single day. And I've never come up reactive to eggs. So a high exposure to food does not guarantee that you're going to have a reaction to that food. It could be that food is going to be a reactive one, but it doesn't directly correlate. If you're eating a high amount of that food, it will not 100% be triggered as a food sensitivity. Next question. What happens when I cheat a little on my gluten-free diet? Will I know immediately? This is Richard from Colorado. Hey, Richard, I used to live in Colorado, beautiful area. If you are to cheat a little bit on your gluten-free diet, I mean, it really all depends on your body. So more than likely what you're going to see is you're going to see whatever that kind of recurring chronic symptom that led you to stop eating gluten, you're going to probably see that symptom start to come back. It could come back in, potentially a few hours as your body's starting to, take it from your mouth down to your esophagus into your stomach and start to digest that food. That could be when you start to feel the symptoms start to get triggered. Or it could be later. It could be 24, 48 to up to 72 hours they start having that symptom come up. I know that actually someone very close to me, they're very gluten sensitive, and it's like for them there's like a threshold. Like if they go out and eat sushi, they can have soy sauce, which will have some gluten in it, very small amount of gluten in it, and they'll be okay. And I think they can also have like maybe one slice of pizza, but if they have like a sandwich or something with like a lot more gluten, it's like for them they've understood their threshold, and when they eat more than this certain threshold, the symptom starts to come up. So once again, that's very personal on what's going to happen when you cheat on your gluten-free diet. The only thing I'd kind of say in closing to answering this question is it really comes down to what your goal is. There's a lot of things that you can get gluten-free that's going to be just as good as the item that has gluten. So I'm assuming that you went gluten-free to feel better. So I would say, hey, when it comes to that choice, if it's conscious of going, all right, I'm going to have this piece of bread, I would say, realize the choice is, do I want to have, the symptom come back? Do I want to have poor performance? All of those things, or do I want to have this, cupcake or piece of bread or whatever? If you slip up, then I mean, hey, just realize what the item was and then continue to move on. All right, so I'm gonna dive into our next. Actually, before we get into the next slide of questions, I'm gonna open up the question thing here. So I'm gonna start answering some of the questions that have come in live. Okay, just give me a moment. Trying to get this question sheet a lot bigger. Okay, here we go. Delay. Oh, is this? Yeah, it's the same Richard. Excellent. So Richard, I actually see your additional question here. Delay between eating and headache. Yeah, I mean, there can absolutely be a delay between the eating of the food and having the headache. How long that specific delay will be, that's going to be personalized to whatever your body is at. For example, if you have a super high metabolism, I would assume that that it would be triggered a lot quicker. All right, so let me see what other new questions we have here. Go to the top. Okay, so this is from Kenneth Yasny. I hope I'm saying your name right. I'll be the first to admit I'm very bad at pronouncing people's names. I apologize for that. So Kenneth Yasny, what about the sensitivity reaction to the casein issue of milk products? Sometimes mucus increases next day, sometimes no extra mucus is apparent. Does IgG or IgE uncover this issue? All right, so first off, it would be if you have a lactose intolerance. If you have a lactose intolerance, then you're going to need lactase, the enzyme, to break it down, to break down the lactose. But if it's not that you're lactose intolerant, but simply that casein is an issue, and it sounds like you're saying that sometimes you have an issue, sometimes you don't. Once again, that could be maybe on the volume of how much of that food you're having. Also, remember, our body is not in a vacuum. There's a lot of stuff going on. So maybe it was that you had one slice of cheese and you had the mucus increase and you had an issue. It could also be because maybe there's a lot of other things that your body was dealing with. Maybe you're fighting off various bacteria, so your immune system was already kind of stressed, and that one piece of cheese kind of put it over the edge, and they started having the mucus. So it's tricky to start putting quantities on how much of this food is going to be an issue, and then also time on, okay, I'm exposed, how fast until it happens. It's in a range, and it really does depend on each individual's unique body. I apologize, I don't have a very specific answer to it, but I mean, humans are incredibly complex internally, and we're actually learning new stuff every single day about our microbiome, all kinds of stuff. I mean, DNA, genetics, like, don't even get me started. It's incredible. So there are a lot of variations. The one thing I'd say is that the best thing that you can do is kind of trial and error to figure out what is going on. But if you do know that casein could be an issue for you, then yeah, I'd say just stop eating that food. That'd be one of the easiest solutions. This question is from Laura Roman. Does food sensitivities last forever, or can you correct it and be able to eat the foods again? Food sensitivities normally do not last forever, and you will be able to correct it by simply avoiding that food, allowing your body's immune system to strengthen up and be able to deal with that food in the future. I personally used to have an issue with blueberries, and as I avoided eating blueberries because it's a very easy food to avoid, there's not really any hidden blueberries like there is, kind of hidden gluten. And now I can eat blueberries, and I do not have the symptom come up that used to come up. I used to eat blueberries and instantly feel bloated. That's no longer the issue for myself. All right, so I still see a ton of questions here. I'm just going to move them to the side and go on to our second slide about questions, because I'm sure we're going to cover a lot there. This is from Robert from Ontario. Oh, excellent. Well, we'll be up in Ontario in a week or two. Do I need to have eaten the foods you are testing me for in the immediate past? The answer to this is not necessarily. We have had individuals that have been tested and they claim that they haven't had the foods for a very long period of time, and they did come up reactive, and they, anecdotally told us that, yeah, when I ate that food, I was surprised that was causing, this issue after realizing I should avoid it. So in direct answer to your question, no, you do not have to have eaten the food immediately in the past for it to come up as a reactive food for you. Your body does have a long memory of the foods that you ate, and the IgG will be triggered against that food. Next question. This is from Heather from Massachusetts. What is the difference between food allergy testing and food sensitivity testing? How accurate is food sensitivity testing? So I think I've gone over a lot of the differences between the two. The specific difference in the testing is this different methodology, because we're looking at IgE as an elephant for the food allergy, the immediate reaction, and we're looking at IgG for the delayed food sensitivity. So it's a different methodology that's being used. And then how accurate is food sensitivity testing? I welcome you to look through our studies to see, how we're able to help people, as that will be probably the most unbiased version of how accurate we are. Coming from me, I realize it's biased, but obviously our goal is to have the laboratory perform at the highest level possible. So I actually, looked earlier today at our split samples for the past 2 months, because internally in our laboratory, we will take a patient sample, split it into 2 different tubes, and then run that testing through to look at the reproducibility, meaning how accurate were we? This time we ran it, we said the results were, whatever, A, B, C. This time that we ran it, were the results the exact same? Because they should be, right? That's what you'd want to see, is same specimen, same test, same results, right? So for the past 2 months, our split sample reproducibility has been 98%, which is incredibly high. I believe for our accreditation has to be above maybe I think like 80% or something. So that's kind of a big range, but we don't want to play it that loose here. We want to make sure that when we're giving you results, that they are accurate and that you can count on them. So to your question of how accurate is food sensitivity testing, when it's performed by our laboratory, is incredibly accurate, and that's the only laboratory that I can speak for. I have found food elimination diet to be more effective than allergy testing. Can you comment? This is Linda Curry from Arizona. I can absolutely comment. Well, first off, food elimination diets are great. They're very effective. The number one issue with a food elimination diet, though, is what foods do you eliminate? So that's what my comment really is. It's focused on, I know that you want to do a food elimination diet. I agree with you that a food elimination diet is incredibly effective. My one question would be, which foods would you eliminate first? What would that diet be? And that's where our testing helps complement that. As I was showing you earlier on what our test results look like, and I showed the reactive and the non-reactive, and then the next page of our results is that 4-day rotation diet. That's an elimination diet. We're just simply taking out the foods that you're reactive to and then telling you, okay, rotate through eating these foods. Can our bodies change and tolerate some foods over time that we were previously sensitive to? This is Peggy from Washington. Actually, I think I just answered this one live with Laura. But just to reiterate, yes, your bodies do change over time. Foods that you used to be sensitive to, you could become no longer sensitive to, and foods that you were not sensitive to in the past, you could become sensitive to in the future. I'm sure the question then is, what the heck do we do? The number one thing is to have a variety in your diet. Make sure that you are chewing your food very well, so that's broken down as much as possible as it goes through your esophagus into your stomach and then into your intestines for digestion and absorption. Also, having a good probiotic, just good gut health in general, will go just miles. It will just go super far. So if you can, drink some aloe vera juice, especially in the morning, like maybe a shot or so of it. You're taking a probiotic, making sure to stay away from fried foods, high sugar foods, things like that can really kind of upset your digestive system. Okay, so before I get to the thank you slide, I want to start answering a couple of these questions live that we have here. Okay, oh yeah. Oh, so Kenneth had another question. I was like, wait, I thought this name looked familiar. So we have another question from Kenneth Yasny, and he says, would you say upper gastric pain usually is food allergy related? I know there's a broad range of diagnosis related to the severe pain, but maybe you have seen a small or large relationship to this pain and food allergy sensitivities. I'd have to know more about specifically what that is, but you're already knowing it's a broad range. What I would say is, leveraging back on the research that we shared, where we were helping individuals that had, gastrointestinal disorders, specifically, I believe it was irritable bowel syndrome that we helped them with. So yeah, I feel that there is a strong relationship as far as what's going on in your stomach and the food that you're eating. To just overly simplify the body, the only thing that's really getting into your stomach is the food that's coming in from your mouth. So if you're having something abnormal, it could easily be from the food that you're eating, if nothing else, because once again, there is no magic bullet, there is no one size fits all. So if nothing else, at least find out what your food sensitivities are so that you can at least eliminate that item. So you can find out, okay, these are my food sensitivities, I'm eliminating these foods, I'm feeling better, or I'm feeling somewhat better, let me further explore what's going on. Something else I'm just remembering as I'm looking back at the gastric pain, if it's ulcers, then that could highly be H. pylori, and we do test for H. pylori. Back in the day, they felt that ulcers were just, I think they thought it was just triggered from stress, and it was there wasn't anything that could be tested to really see what was going on with your ulcer. But in reality, vast majority of ulcers, I think maybe all ulcers, are actually triggered by I believe it's a bacteria called H. pylori, and we do test for H. pylori, and we can find out if that's what your issue is. Looking through the questions here. Delay. Okay, that was from Richard again. Okay, here's one from Lee Rivlin? I apologize, as I mentioned about with names. But Lee, if I score 4 and higher out of 6 on IgG, IgA for dairy, is that an allergy? All right, so I'm just going to address that one first because there's a couple of things that you have in the question. If you scored really high for an IgG reaction, that's IgG, that's a food sensitivity. The difference between IgG and IgE is everything. They are different parts of the immunoglobulin system, different. So they are not related. It's not that if you have a really high reaction, then you've been upgraded to allergy or downgraded to sensitivity. It doesn't work like that. It's just these are two different things, IgG, IgE. The question continues, if I have a painful reaction to eggs within 45 minutes after having taken it out of my diet for months, how do I classify that? That would still depend on what the reaction is, if it's IgG or IgE. With it being 45 minutes, that's more than likely going to fall into a food sensitivity because an immediate allergy usually happens like in the mouth. So you will, or even on your skin, like if someone is to put peanut butter on someone that is allergic to peanut butter, that's an immediate reaction. They're going to have that symptom very quickly. So with you saying 45 minutes, that's telling me you've had it in your mouth, you've chewed it up, you've swallowed it, it's gone down to your esophagus, it's probably, I think, in your stomach now. That's more than likely going to be a reaction. And then your question continues with, I scored 4 IgA out of 6 on lobster. What does that mean in my daily life? How bad is it if I eat it? Once again, I mean, that is a different test that you had performed than the one that we had performed. So it's hard for me to give you direct answers on what the actionable would be because I believe you tested with a different company. But I would say if you see that you have a high reaction to a food, if you've been exposed to that food and you know it wasn't a life-threatening issue, then you could always expose yourself to the food to see what that non-life-threatening, non-high severe reaction is, so you can identify what's going on and then better understand how to eliminate that food. But in all reality, I mean, if you have a high reaction to a specific food, just eliminate the food. I just wouldn't eat the food. Going down to more questions. If I was tested 18 months ago and improved after eliminating the foods, do the results still apply now? Do the results still apply now if I am having a relapse, or do I need a new test? 18 months ago, I mean, I would highly recommend that you get retested because, as I said earlier, after your first test, I would say I'll do 6 months, and then after that test, I would, every 9 months to 1 year, so 9 to 12 months. So 18 months. Could your results still, apply to you? They could. I mean, there's often times that someone will have, foods that continue throughout their life that they're just, having food sensitivity to. But my personal recommendation and what I personally do with myself is I get tested every year. So I would recommend getting retested. If you do want to get tested with us, we do have a promotion going until I believe it's July 4th. I'm just looking down at the date. So I'll make sure to have someone follow up with you, Doris. Okay, going through the questions. Renee Anderson, wheat is on my list. So that means I'm not gluten sensitive, correct? But the wheat itself, does this mean any wheat? Oh, sorry, there's no new question came in. Wheat is on my list, so that means I am not gluten sensitive, correct? But the wheat itself, does this mean any wheats of the world? If not, what wheats could I ingest? Okay. So I'm a little confused by the question, but I think I got it. So you're reactive to wheat. So wheat has 2 different parts. There is, well, not 2 different parts. There's 2 main things in wheat. So first there's wheat, which has, the husk and the endosperm and I think it's the gluten in it. So within the gluten, there's gliadin and glutenin. It's a tricky word. We should probably do a webinar on this. So if you have an issue with wheat, then you are tested on that whole wheat, seed or wheat husk to find out if you have an issue with it. Wheat also contains gluten, so we recommend doing an anti-gliadin test to find out if you have an issue with gluten. If you have an issue with gluten, then everything that is wheat containing everything that is gluten containing, you would need to avoid. So wheat has gluten, barley has gluten. I'm trying to think what else has gluten. Blinking at the moment. I know there's one other main thing that has gluten in it, but you would need to avoid all of those foods if you have an issue with gluten. So I would highly recommend getting tested with our anti-gliadin test. Going through additional questions. Oh, so this is similar. This is kind of a good follow-up question. Does being reactive towards wheat mean a person shouldn't consume gluten? It depends. Wheat does have gluten. So let me backtrack with a study that we did here. Well, I shouldn't say study. It was more research that we conducted here. I don't recall the exact year. If I was to guess, it was like maybe 2011. What we did is every time we had someone come in with a blood print test, we would also run an anti-gliadin test to see if they were also. So we first looked to go, all right, here's the blood print results. If they came up reactive to any of the gluten-containing grains, then we will run the anti-gliadin test to find out how often someone's reactive to something that contains gluten and they're actually reactive to gluten. What we found is that I think it was 63% of the time, individuals who have had their blood print and were reactive to a gluten-containing item were also reactive to gluten. So, to answer your question, Mark, does being reactive towards wheat mean a person shouldn't consume gluten? Not necessarily, but there is a high probability that you have an issue with gluten. So, more than likely, I would avoid gluten. Okay. Barrett, you got me with this one. Brett Beatty? Will this podcast be available for me to watch again? Will you post a link or have it on your website? Absolutely. I mean, technically this would be a webinar, but if we put the audio version, it would be a podcast. But yes, to the point, we are recording this and I will be sharing this to everyone that has registered, as well as making sure to share it to our entire email list so that you can easily, watch this again, watch over parts, everything that you need. From Ibi Akinjobi, that is a tricky name and very unique. I like it. Can you go into more detail about your CLIA accreditation? Is it waived? We are not waived. Definitely not. We go through a very rigorous CLIA inspection. So our laboratory, it is not waived. For laboratories that are performing this type of testing, if they're based in the United States, they should have a CLIA license. If they do not have a CLIA license, that would be a ginormous red flag. Like, that's not good. They should absolutely have a CLIA license if they're taking in human specimen and running a food sensitivity or food allergy test. So they should not have it waived. So let's see. So we got a question again from Brett Betty. I'm trying to see your previous one. Oh, okay, you're asking about this will be recorded. Here we go. Before submitting blood for a follow-up test, should I eat the foods I reacted to at the first testing? How long does it take to clear IgGs from our systems? I believe it takes 90 days, which is why we have the 90-day food avoidance. And then, should I eat the foods I reacted to on the first testing before? You do not have to. You do not have to eat those same foods before the testing. It's not going to make a difference. We're still going to be able to pinpoint if you're having an issue with those foods. So what I would recommend is when you go to retest, I mean, simply allowing there to be at least a 6-month period from your initial test, following the program, avoiding the foods, and then reintroducing them at that 6-month mark or beyond, get retested. There's no pre-preparation that you need to do. Going through the questions, that is all of the questions. So moving back on to the presentation, thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the attention and the time that you've invested to better learn about food sensitivities and food allergies. As promised, at the beginning of this presentation, we will be doing more webinars. We received, I'm just looking at my notes, over 200 questions were submitted. I think I answered maybe 10. Like not enough, right? So we will be having a lot more webinars. We will be focusing on educating people a lot more about what's going on in the relationship between the food that you eat and how you feel. For now, thank you so much. We will conclude this webinar and I will make sure to get the recording out to you later today. Thank you so much.